setting is Geneva, Switzerland. Usually, this city is a symbol of calm diplomacy, but this week, the air is thick with tension. Senior officials from the United States, Ukraine, and Russia have gathered here for a third round of high-stakes talks. It comes just days before the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion, and while the negotiators sit down at the table, a major political storm is brewing outside the room. This brings us to the most significant and perhaps shocking development of all. Donald Trump has made a sudden and sharp pivot in his rhetoric. For years, U.S. policy towards Ukraine was defined by bipartisan support against the aggressor. But now, the president is explicitly pointing the finger at the victim, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Speaking to reporters, Trump didn't mince words. He suggested that it is actually Ukraine that is holding up a peace deal, stating clearly that Zelenskyy needs to act fast or miss a great opportunity. He argued that Russia wants to make a deal, painting the Kremlin as the eager participant and Kyiv as the obstacle. This is a remarkable break from tradition, effectively echoing a narrative that Moscow has been pushing for years. Zelenskyy has quickly responded to this new pressure, calling it unfair. He maintains that any plan requiring Ukraine to surrender territory in the Donbass is a non-starter. He fears that giving in now would just be a repeat of past mistakes, similar to what happened in Chechnya or Georgia. He believes that peace comes through strength and sanctions, not through capitulation. But the message coming from the Trump administration is stark. Between the negotiations in Switzerland and the public comments from Air Force One, the pressure on Zelenskyy to cave to Russian demands is reaching a fever pitch. While the diplomatic engines roar in Geneva, the Russian delegation has arrived with a very specific and unwavering set of goals. Leading the team is Vladimir Medinsky, a staunch conservative and close aide to Vladimir Putin. Their strategy is clear. They are not here to make small compromises. They are here to solidify their conquests. So, what is Moscow actually asking for? Their demands are maximalist and largely non-negotiable. First, they require full recognition of their territorial gains. This means Ukraine must permanently surrender the 20% of the country currently occupied by Russian forces. But they do not want to stop there. The Kremlin is pushing for control over the remaining areas of the Donbass region. On top of the land grab, they are demanding strict neutrality guarantees, ensuring Ukraine never joins NATO. And they continue to insist on the controversial removal of so-called nationalist elements, a demand they label denazification. Crucially, the Kremlin's hand has been strengthened by the political turmoil in the United States. When former President Trump pointed the finger at Zelenskyy, suggesting that Ukraine was the obstacle to peace, and that Russia wanted to make a deal, he effectively validated the Kremlin's narrative. This rhetoric shifts the blame away from the aggressor and onto the victim, legitimizing Russia's hardline posture. With the American president publicly scolding Ukraine while remaining soft on Moscow, Putin sees no need to rush or lower his demands. For the Kremlin, this silence from the West is not just calculated, it is golden. To understand why peace seems so far away, we have to talk about a concept diplomats call leverage. Simply put, leverage is the ability to pressure the other side to get what you want. And right now, Ukraine is watching its leverage evaporate. The signals coming from the US administration are creating a dangerous vacuum. We have seen President Trump shift the blame squarely onto President Zelenskyy, suggesting that Ukraine is the one holding up a peace deal, when the most powerful man in the world implies that the victim of aggression is actually the obstacle to peace. It changes the mathematics of the war entirely. You can almost hear the frustration in Kyiv, where leaders feel they are being asked to make disproportionate compromises, while Russia faces no such demands. Now, try to look at this through Vladimir Putin's eyes. Why should he negotiate in good faith? Why should he give back the 20% of Ukraine he currently occupies? He sees the United States pressuring Kyiv to make a deal, while Moscow faces no real pressure to withdraw. If Russia believes a future US administration will force Ukraine to capitulate, they have absolutely no incentive to stop the tanks now. They can just wait for the vacuum to fill itself. This is the terrifying reality of lost leverage. Ukraine cannot negotiate from a position of strength if its own biggest supporter is signaling that time is up. The result is a strategic deadlock, where hope for a just peace is being replaced by the likelihood of a dictated settlement, one that favors the side that refuses to compromise. Picture the scene in Geneva. It is neutral ground, but the air is thick with tension. While American envoys are calling this meaningful progress, the messaging coming out of Washington is mixed and confusing. Donald Trump is actively turning up the heat. He is openly placing the blame for the stalled peace talks on Volodymyr Zelenskyy, suggesting that Ukraine is the obstacle to ending the war. Trump has even warned that Ukraine better come to the table fast or risk missing a great opportunity. But for Zelenskyy and his administration, this feels less like diplomacy and more like a sudden ambush. This brings us to Kyiv's counter-narrative. They are effectively shifting into survival mode. The Ukrainian president is pushing back hard against the idea that he is the one stalling peace. He calls the pressure from the White House unfair. In a candid interview, he expressed a sliver of hope that Trump's public berating is just a negotiation tactic rather than a final decision. However, the red lines remain drawn in blood. Russia is not hiding its game. The Kremlin is still demanding the rest of the Donbas region and vast territories. They want 20% of Ukraine. Zelenskyy is crystal clear that he cannot and will not sign off on that. He looks at history, at the Russian invasions of Chechnya and Georgia, and sees a pattern. He argues that allowing an aggressor to take something is a critical mistake that only leads to more war later. So how does Kyiv handle this diplomatic hostility while fighting for its existence. They are framing it as a fight for justice, not just land. Zelenskyy says true diplomacy requires strength, not just concessions. He is telling the West that peace cannot be achieved by handing victory to Putin. It is a delicate balancing act. He has to court Western leaders and manage the friction with the MAGA movement, while simultaneously assuring his own people and the troops on the front lines that their sacrifices will not be traded away for a quick fix. It is a seductive promise. The idea that a change in leadership or a firm handshake could end a devastating war in just 24 hours. But when we look past the headlines coming out of places like Mar-a-Lago or Geneva, we run into a hard wall of reality. This brings us to what we call the deal maker fallacy. On the surface, American envoys are talking about meaningful progress. They speak of frameworks and 20-point plans. But if you listen closely to the leaders actually doing the fighting, the music changes completely. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been frank, calling the pressure to compromise unfair and pointing out that there is no agreement on the key issues. Why is it so stuck? Because a quick deal is structurally impossible. The requirements for peace are mutually exclusive. Right now, Russia holds about 20% of Ukrainian territory, but they are not stopping there. The Kremlin is demanding the rest of the Donbas region. For Ukraine, ceding that land is a red line that would amount to surrendering their sovereignty. On the flip side, Ukraine needs something concrete before they sign anything. They need robust security guarantees. They need to know that if they stop fighting, Russia will not just reload and attack again in a few years. But Russia has refused to offer those guarantees, so we are stuck in a deadlock. One side wants land the other cannot give. The other wants security the first side will not offer. No amount of deal-making artistry can bridge that gap overnight. As we watch the diplomatic efforts unfold in Geneva, a chilling realization begins to set in. The growing divide between the United States and Europe is becoming just as significant as the fighting on the ground itself. What we are witnessing is no longer just a dispute over borders or land in Eastern Europe. It has morphed into a fundamental question about the future of the Western world and its alliances. Consider the current dynamic. On one side, we have the United States under the Trump administration, openly placing the burden of peace on Ukraine. President Trump has been vocal, urging President Zelenskyy to move fast and essentially make a deal. He is pointing the finger at Kyiv, suggesting they are the obstacle to ending the war, while seemingly accepting Russia's desire for a resolution at face value. This public pressure on a nation that is currently under invasion creates a confusing picture for the rest of the world. On the other side, there is the European stance. European leaders, along with the Ukrainian president, see a completely different reality. They see an aggressor, Russia, that has not dropped its maximalist demands. The Kremlin still wants large chunks of Ukrainian territory, including the Donbas region, and a victory that looks like total capitulation. Zelenskyy has made it clear that trading land for a false peace is not an option, and he insists that security guarantees must come before any settlement. This difference in approach creates a dangerous ambiguity. For decades, the cornerstone of global stability has been the united front of the transatlantic alliance. But now, the two pillars of that partnership seem to be pulling in different directions. When the United States questions the fairness of Ukraine's resistance, while Russia holds onto occupied land, the signal sent to the world is one of uncertainty. It is this deepening fracture that explains why hopes for success remain so low. Peace is difficult enough to achieve when two armies are fighting. It becomes nearly impossible when the partnership meant to enforce stability is fractured from within. We are entering a new era, a new kind of Cold War, where the biggest threat to global order might not be the enemy outside, but the confusion and disagreement within the West itself.